And clear of the closing doors, please.
What up, somewhat up? Grind and Pivot, Queens, New York. Today, in the house, straight out of Pelham, New York. That's right, Pelham, New York, not Nashville. We are grooving on a Monday afternoon with a fellow Sagittarius, the king, and I say the king, all rise for the king of blue-eyed soul. I don't care what you say. The man, the icon, Felix Cavaliere.
Yes.
Felix, how are you, my brother?
Pretty good, man. Thank you so much.
Great to have you. And what's it like being a New Yorker down in Nashville before we even get started? Because I know you've been down there since '88.
Once a New Yorker, always a New Yorker. You know, they always know where you come from immediately. And it's just interesting. You know, it's a different planet. It's definitely a different planet. You know, we're still trying to get a good deli. It's just different. But, I mean, the thing that we do have down here is music. This is definitely a music place. You know, the first time I came down here, I saw people from, well, for example, Steppenwolf, John Kay was down here. Two of the E Street Band were here. Now there's just one, Gary Talent.
Oh, what? And, Danny was down there, right?
Danny was here, and you know, and there was so many people. Bobby Gaudio. And I said, wow, you know, this is the place to be for music.
Amazing. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it still is. It's still cooking. It's a
Right.
different, it's a totally different game now, but it is still cooking. So you have a book, Memoir of a Rascal,
Right.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Why now, and what motivated you to write it?
Well, you know, in 2013, the original guys, you know, Dino, Gene, Eddie, and myself, we were asked to do a Broadway show, Once Upon a Dream, on Broadway, you know. And we did that. And as a prerequisite to that, we were doing press conferences. And I noticed that everybody had a different answer for the same questions. So I said, okay, and I tell it as a joke now, but did Custer really win that battle or lose that battle? I don't know.
Right.
You know, you got to figure the last person that's there that writes the story. And I said, wait a minute, I've got to I got to at least put down what I saw, what I heard, and then I realized that, you know, I mean, I've been here for quite a few decades. You know, I was only a rascal for like 5 years. What about the other years? And that's how it came about.
Interesting. So you're kind of setting the record straight, you know, per se. Now, the book uncovers quite a bit. Did you kind of battle with yourself to kind of let it go full throttle? I mean, and also besides that, how did your relationship with Stevie Van Zandt did that bring it into effect as well?
No. I mean, like I say, I try to really stay out of the relationship department with this book because, you know, first of all, I don't really think people give a damn, you know, and second of all, it's got nothing to do with my life. You know, my life has been, you know, very, very fortunate, very blessed. I really got to be honest. I don't have too many, if any, complaints. You know, I mean, I'm still here. I'm still working, you know, and I got a great family, grandkids. You know, there's not too much to complain about. However, you know, if you want to complain, the second book will do that.
Right. Well, that's interesting. You know, talk about the disappointment in a way. Let's kind of reflect a little bit, and then we're going to get back into the history. But just let's kind of talk about the disappointment with the guys in the band.
I'm sure that anybody who has experienced a divorce can give you the similar answers. You know, you start off, you know, basically really friendly, common kind of desires in terms of like you want to try and make it. One of the chapters, the main chapter of the book, I deal with the fact that I studied with a guru, you know, with a man by the name of Swami Satchidananda, who was the gentleman who opened up the Woodstock festival there. It's interesting because when you study with someone like that, they tell you that the main enemy is ego. And, it's so interesting because that's exactly what happened. We never had anybody steal anybody's wife or girlfriend or rob any money. There was nothing of any kind of, disastrous, because a lot of groups have had that, embezzlement. And we just, like I say, the word ego is what kind of destroyed it. And, unfortunately, it's something that I'm really not proud of, because I look at these guys as my brother.
Well, yeah, because you guys absolutely had a magic together, sum of all parts, and there's no doubt about that. Let's go back for a second. So you're from Pelham. You grew up. I know your dad was a dentist. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. What'd your mom do? Your mom do anything?
She was a pharmacist.
Really?
She was head of a hospital in the late 40s, for God's sake. She was way ahead of her time.
Interesting. So both your folks had some intellect, had some brains, had some science in their head. You started off playing piano. Tell us about the classical piano, because that's what you were really starting to be, correct?
Yeah, well, I was involved with 8 years of pretty intense classical music education. I had 3 lessons a week for 8 years. And the intent was basically to, pursue the talent that my mom saw in me, but for a classical career. And again, now this is all in the book. You could read it. It's documented.
That's correct. But
what happened is I went to school, to junior high, and a fella who was to become, one of my dearest friends, how you merged all the different elementary schools when you go to junior high. He turned around. His last name was C-A-L. My last name was C-A-V. We were right in front of one another. And he said, hey, you like rock and roll? And I had never heard rock and roll. I didn't know what he was talking about, but I did not want to feel like unhip or uncool. So I said, oh, yeah, man, yeah. All I heard was, the kind of music that I was, being taught and, kind of like surrounded in. I went home that evening. And then, we had the really good advantage growing up in the metropolitan area. If you were born, you weren't born, but if you were born, you could hear Alan Freed. Alan Freed brought rock and roll from Cleveland to New York. So I turn on the radio and I hear people playing the same instrument that I was playing, but not like I was playing it. I heard Ray Charles, Fats Domino, Jerry Lee Lewis. I heard, oh my God, Little Richard. I said, wow, that's a piano, right? That's a piano. So it just captured me. That's really easy kind of like summation of what happened.
That's interesting. So you were home practicing your Bach inventions. Hold on, and I know this is a story. I don't know if you told. I want you to maybe tell it. I got the ruler.
Yeah.
Tell us about the piano teacher and the ruler.
Basically, the idea behind classical music is not to be a creative person. The idea is to reproduce what was written maybe 100, 200 years ago, if not more, And the more you try to, in any way, change is when you get hit. It's really interesting because your job as a classical pianist is not to recreate by any means the masters. And so if I even put my hand down like ba ba instead of ba, they'll let you know. And in those days you could hit people without going to jail.
So were you just staying with the piano? Were you practicing a ton? Were you practicing a lot? What was it like?
Well, yeah, I say 3 lessons a week. You really had no choice. I mean, unless you wanted to be a fool, you had to come prepared to the next lesson, and it kind of showed. And I enjoyed it. I mean, I did enjoy it, and I was learning. I was kind of like in awe of what I was playing, because you think about longevity. Okay, 50 years, 60 years. How about 100, 200? If you can still play my music in 100, 200 years. I'm doing okay. You know what I'm
They
saying?
will. They will be. Yeah. The classical though was I studied same thing. I started with the classical too. You know, it's very disciplined. It's interpreting. You're interpreting something, and if the person who's teaching you, you got to interpret it their way. There's no other way. It's just a little tight. But if you go back, and I'm sure you know this, later on in life, you hear things now, and it's like, oh wow, this is incredible. You know, Bach, Mozart, these guys were unbelievable geniuses. You meet John, your guy,
Yeah.
John Cal. He tells you,
John Kalanya was
Johnny
the name.
Kalanya. He
Right.
tells you, he gives you the rock and roll story,
That's right.
and that's it. It's over for you. It's basically over for you. Is that how it goes?
Well, yeah, because basically right after that, I started, kind of listening to what in those days was just becoming rock and roll. There was a small group of musicians older than I was actually they were high school, and they had a band, and they asked me to join. Now I'm playing classics, like in other words, like Cole Porter, and because we did bar mitzvahs,
like
and
standards, right?
Yeah. Probably what your dad was doing up there in the mountains,
100%,
because, and that's another education, because now you're learning what these giants, Sammy Kahn, Cole Porter, Irving Berlin, now you're playing real music, and it was interesting because we would do bar mitzvahs, we would do weddings, we would do proms. Now, just that what is happening now is rock and roll was coming in. Especially the twist was starting to come in. So basically, we would have a little segment of the show where I would do my Little Richard, or I would do my, Chubby Checker or whatever. And before you know it, that became the highlight of the band, because everybody would say, well, okay, I like trumpet, but this kid's good.
Right.
So there was this evolution of coming out of the shell, so to speak. A lot of people, my friends were all big football players, and they're all like, and I'm about 3 feet tall. And how are you going to get noticed? Well, music brings out your personality, and all of a sudden you have a personality. You're not just a little guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the mean streets of Mount Vernon that you paroled over there.
Well, I used to say that all the time in Pelham. I mean, I could go 15 minutes in either direction and get beat to a pulp. You know what I mean? Yeah. In the Rochelle, Mount Vernon, Yonkers, White Plains,
exactly.
Really.
Yeah, Pelham's still beautiful though. Really,
It's nice. It was a great thing that my folks did for us, because they really. My father's family came from the Bronx. My mom's family came from Manhattan down 17th Street. And they wanted us to have a good education, my sister and I, and we did. We got a good education.
Absolutely. So tell us about the organ, because that I know there's a story there about how you got into the organ,
right,
and about you going down somewhere in New York City. Tell that story.
I was asked, imagine the same guy, John. Hey, there's a club up in New Rochelle, man. It's in a black neighborhood, man, and it's a trio. I said, oh, okay, let's go. When we got in, we were underage. I don't know how the hell we got in, and it was an organ trio. Now, what this means is there's a man playing bass, rhythm, singing, and soloing on this instrument called a Hammond organ. And there was 2 other people. There was a sax and a drum. And I said, all this music is what? Wow. Look at this. I'd never heard anything like that. That's kind of like, well, you hear it in church and you hear it in, nightclubs. If you happen to be in the right neighborhood, And so I said, I got to see what this is. This is, something I never heard before. It was very funky. It was very melodic. And God, he was doing all this stuff. So I went on a hunt, a search. Now, I'm in Westchester, and the nearest Hammond was at Macy's down in Herald Square. I get on the train, I go down, and this is all there, as I say. And I meet Mr. Silverstein. Mr. Silverstein's in charge of the floor where all the Hammond organs are. And God, he's probably not here anymore, and he saw me coming in, and he knew that I couldn't afford the mat. You know what I mean? Those things were $3,000 then. You know,
$3,000 back then. Wow.
yeah. And he says, yeah, it's right behind those doors. And there was a room that was dedicated just to the Hammond, sales. And he let me go in by myself, and I'll never forget it because it was like going to a holy place because I didn't even know how to turn the thing on. But he left me alone in there, It was magic.
Amazing.
And anybody ever turn one of those on, they don't just go click.
Yeah, that's got to warm up. There's a couple of
There's a generator, and he goes.
There's got a couple of different switches. So we want everybody, please. Obviously, we're going to put the book link down in the description below. But these are just little tidbits. We're giving you we're opening,
Right.
cracking the window just a little bit, and then we want them to actually, of course, read the full thing. Now, I have a question for you on the organ.
Right.
Your approach, the left-hand bass. And the pedals, where did you get that from? Who was Jimmy Smith? Did he influence you in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a big listener of jazz now, and I heard this phenomenal musician Jimmy Smith. And Jimmy Smith, basically, he not only played, he also studied the bass. And so he was really playing bass. He wasn't just, making the root chords or root notes. He was playing a bass with his hand and his foot. The foot kind of accents it. It's kind of hard to describe if you've never touched it, but it's an octave below. So the bass goes like doom, 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 and the foot goes duk, 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 duk on top of it. Gives it a little pop. So I heard, his records, and I said, man, that's the beauty about studying music, because music is music. I mean, it may be a different genre, it may be a different way, but it's still music. So if you know music, you can figure it out. And, I've said it many times, it's kind of like learning to ride a bike.
How are your ears, though? I mean, not hearing-wise. I'm going to talk about that later. But I'm talking about you had good, you have to have that kind of innate ability. So I guess your parents might have seen that. You had some innate ability.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah, but like I say, when you study classical, one of the first things you train are your ears. I mean, they teach you, for those that don't want to know, they teach you intervals. They'll play a note. You got to find it,
Tight singing.
They'll play and then they'll play two notes, and you got to find the two of them, and you got to find the difference between, this is between C and F. Okay. You know what I mean? You find that. So they really train your ear. They train your hands. We would have to sit literally on a staircase and spread our hands so that we got the big spread so you could do the octaves and all. This is a real, it's a course. You know what I'm saying? It's not just, it's physical. You have to sit properly. You have to hold your hands properly. And you got to exercise your fingers. Now I would use weights and stuff like that. So it's a whole thing. But your ears are a major part of it.
Yeah, that definitely separates the men from the boys in a lot of things. Like I've always said, my dad had the ears, so he could play anything, right?
Well, I think you could develop that too. If you don't have it,
train. You do. You definitely have to. I agree 100%. You can work on that. You can work on that. Obviously, the Giants are a different story, but you can definitely work on that because intervals, 1 3 5, 1 4, 1 5. You hear it, you can memorize it, and then you can hear it. It's the guys that hear it in every key, which is kind of.
Well, I mean, it's not only that, but I mean, some people have that perfect pitch, which is not only a blessing, that could be a real problem because
it could be a curse. You absolutely.
Anybody that's out of tune drives you nuts,
Yeah, exactly. So let's fast forward. So let's talk about you're in high school, you're playing, you got your thing going, you're actually thinking of going to college, and you do go to college, right? You go to Syracuse University, right. Correct?
Yes.
Tell us about that time a little bit, because that's also when you got involved with Joey D and the Starlighters, meeting the boys from Jersey and the Escorts.
Yeah, well, that was after, the college was a great experience, because, we had fraternities up there, and I started a band up there called the Escorts. I actually made a record up there, too, which came out years later. They said it was the Rascals, but it wasn't. It was me. It was called the Syracuse, and but I had a great time because I was playing for the frat parties. We were playing for the homecoming, and we had a great sports program at Syracuse. They still do. Yeah, so I mean, had a ball. I mean,
More of a
and I
football
made
school back then, right? More of a
yeah, and I had
football school back
made a
then?
lot of friends, man. Especially the athletes, because they said, little brother, man, you all right, little bro? You're doing it, man. So these people have become lifelong friends. Those are with us, and those are not with us. But I mean, talking about Ernie Davis and John Mackey, people like that, they're Hall of Fame, even though Ernie was taken early. But I really enjoyed myself. I enjoyed myself so much that I had to get back to my grade point average, otherwise I was going to be gone. You know what I'm saying? I really had a good time.
Right. So you're playing during the summers. You went up to the Catskills. Now we were talking that before. How did you get? How'd you get that gig, and how did it all start?
Well, we had basically two fraternities represented in the band. We had a Zeta Beta Tau, which was a Jewish fraternity, and we had the Sig Eps, everything was segregated in those days. I mean, God forbid you have, you mingle, and one of the fellas had a contact who had contact with the Rowley Hotel, George Gilbert and the Rowley, and said, well, how'd you like to play the summer up there? And we grabbed it. I said, let's go. Now, these are, I think there was 3 of us that were pre-med. And there was 2 others, and we went and worked a summer in the hotel, and that's where I met Joey D. Joey D came in as one of the headliners for the weekend, because every weekend a major act would come in, and we would do everything else. We'd play for the lounge, we'd play for the kids, we'd play for the fashion show, we'd welcome the guests as they came in for the Sunday evening check-in. It was great. I had a ball. I really enjoyed it, and like I say, it's kind of like. It's you're a professional musician for a minute and a half. I mean, you have room and board and $60 a week, and I loved it. And that's where they found me. They saw me there, And again, this is all documented in this book. It's interesting because I had no idea that I was going to pursue this as a career. And next thing I know, Joey's band went to Europe, and their organ player quit. They needed somebody. And they remembered me, they called me, changed my life. Instead of going back to school, I went to Germany.
What did you folks say?
Well, that's another story that I put in there, too, because, my dad, my mom passed, but my dad, my dad was a, very conservative kind of guy. He didn't really go to clubs or anything, but when he came to the hotel, it's a great story. I have it documented there. The guy who was like the maitre d' of the, the whole restaurant and concierge restaurant and nightclub, he saw me kind of moping a little bit, he says, man, what's the matter? I said, well, I got to go back to school. He said, no, you're good, man. You should do this. I said, yeah, but, my dad, He says, what do you mean? He says, well, he wants me to be a doctor. He doesn't want me to, we don't really talk about this. He says, oh, yeah. I says, yeah, he's coming up here. He says, oh, your father's coming up here? He was an Israeli, this guy. He says, oh, don't worry about a thing. When my dad came up to the hotel, it was like I was Elvis Presley. I mean, he gave him the first seat in the club. He gave him the best seat in the restaurant. My dad says, wow, you're doing pretty good here, huh? Yeah, making $60 a friggin' week, you know what I'm saying? But he thought, because it was a big place, those hotels, they were magnificent. I mean, you told me your story there. People would go from New York to the Catskills, and they would let their hair down, and they would have a ball. You know what I mean? And, then they go back to the city, go back to work and straighten up. It's kind of like when you do a cruise now, But they just... they made it so easy for you because they were there to have a good time. There weren't any music critics there. They wanted to rock. They wanted to dance. They wanted to drink. And so anyway, he gave me permission.
That's great. Yeah, so you stated before that you never really thought you were going to do this as a career necessarily.
Well, seriously, in those days, it wasn't much of a career. It really wasn't much of a career until Zeppelin came along. Then it was a career, had a lot of zeros attached. You know what I'm saying? I mean, obviously, if you want to, kind of live up to, the bar that your parents put there. You got to earn some money, and music was not a way to
you're
go.
You're not going to be a musician for sure.
But and the reason I say Zeppelin is because what happened when Zeppelin came around is now the world internationally, like for example, we were on Atlantic. And Atlantic was Atlantic only in the United States. In Europe, we had a different record company in every country, which was impossible. You got robbed everywhere. Not just one place, every place. But when Zeppelin came to Atlantic, they were Warner Brothers now, all over the world. You put out a record, it's all over the world. So now the market has expanded to a tremendous, I think the first platinum album was Cream. If you remember Cream in the 60s. And so, it became kind of a lucrative career. I mean, it's still kind of frowned upon. It's like somebody said, well, I want to start a restaurant. Well, yeah, you're crazy.
Good luck.
It's the same with music. I mean, when you look, your parents, don't be a musician. Don't do this. You know what I mean?
Fine. It's pie in the sky. It's pie.
Well, it's also the same with artists. I mean, graphic artists. I know some people who are phenomenal artists. They couldn't make a living. Photographers. Any art form. It's kind of tough.
Absolutely. So you have this great experience. You go to Germany with Joey D. You come back, and this is when you met actually David Bugatti, the Bugatti brothers. You met David first, right?
Oh boy, did I ever! Yes.
Right, and so you met David first, and then
I tell you about the first day I met David.
You know what? I know the story. Please tell it. Please tell it, because you
came into the Catskills.
Could be this, by the way. You could be this story. Go ahead.
He comes in. He kept looking at my nose. He says, "Are you Jewish?" I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, I wasn't sure when I saw the nose." I said, "Okay, I'm in for a lot of trouble with these guys." Yeah, very different. The guys from Jersey, they're a whole different breed, man. They really are. No doubt.
Absolutely. So tell us about that. I mean, I know you also you met Frankie Valli as well, but how did how did putting together the Rascals happen? Take us back a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's basically what we had to deal with in those days was the draft. If you weren't a college student or if you weren't married, you were susceptible and vulnerable to Uncle Samuel calling you up and saying, "Come this way," So really, when I left school, and I took a job with Joey, and then I took a job with a young lady who was working out in Vegas. We backed her up for a lounge, from 12 till 6 a.m. in Las Vegas, and then I got drafted. See, so really, there was no sense starting anything. And then, in those days, especially the beginning of that Vietnam War, they were very choosy, and they figured, look at this guy with long hair, he doesn't look like a fighter to me, he doesn't look like, so they didn't want me, and so that's when I started the band. Right. There were three people that were kind of like working in a club that Joey had. It was Gene Cornish and Eddie and myself, and then there was a fourth person. There was a drummer who, when I asked if we should try to do a band on our own, because don't forget the Beatles were around now, and the Kinks, and the Stones, and the Animals, and Spoonful, and Birds. They were all coming up. So why don't we do it? Let's try it. The drummer didn't want to go, and he wanted a steady job, which is understandable. He wanted to pay bills. We were just speculating. That's all we were doing. And then I met this phenomenal drummer named Dino Dinelli, who I saw him play 2 songs, and I flipped, because he was
right? You lost.
So good. He was so good.
Talk about the meaning of that, because if you can give.
Well, basically, it's documented. Again, we did this in the show, but I was seeing a lady at that time. She was a bank teller, and she said, "Yeah, you guys are all right, but I know a drummer." I said, "What the hell do you know? You're a freaking bank teller, You got numbers." She took me to see this drummer in a place called the Metropole. And for those who don't know, the Metropole was a place you could be on the street. It was on 7th Avenue, around the 40s, and you could look in the window and you see the band. Later there was other things to see, but in those days it was
correct.
a band.
I was just going to say, I know it as that. I took piano lessons right across the street, and I think also, in the Odd Couple in the front in the beginning.
There you go.
He's looking through, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, Dino was working, in a place where big bands were playing. A lot of big bands were led by drummers in those days. There was like Buddy Rich, there was Louie Bellson, G. Krupa. They were all leaders of a band as drummers. Well, as leaders of a band, you have to put on a show.
And now a few words from our sponsor.
We here at McTeeny Designs have one client and one client only. We focus exclusively on fashions for the pleasant and portly gentleman. Our designers understand the fashion dilemmas associated with corpulence and excessive sloth. Using the tried and true fashion theory of bold 2 and 3 color blocking with contrasting fabric and texture lends itself to elegantly masquerade decades of unfettered gluttony. And remember, at McTeeny Designs, it's about the garment, not the girth.
And now back to the interview.
And that's where he learned how to twirl the sticks, throw them up in the air, catch them, never losing a beat. And in rock and roll, prior to that, I don't think there's anybody doing that. So when I saw him play a song called I Who Have Nothing, which is, I think, a Benny King song, It was just, he goes, ah, and he would go, boom, I who have nothing, and perfect time. And I said, oh my God, this guy's really cool, And then he had a little secret that he never shared with too many people, that, a lot of people who are drummers, they have to build up their left hand for the snare. He was lefty. So
he had a strong hand. Okay.
And he didn't change his drum. Like Jimi Hendrix, he changed his guitar, to play lefty. You know what I'm saying? But Dino didn't, so he was strong, you know what I mean? And it was just, seriously, it's kind of like when you meet your wife or you meet your girlfriend or your soulmate or whatever it is. The first time we played together, it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It just clicks like that. There's a magic between people, Obviously, everybody knows from different, relationships.
Absolutely. So you guys got together. So it was you, Eddie, Cornish, and Dino. Started rehearsing in your house, right? Is that true?
In my dad's house, yeah.
Right.
I don't have a house. I was looking at a room.
Back then, growing up, your house was, come to my house.
I had a room.
That's my parents.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to go back home and live because then I would have to tell my dad that I was starving to death, I mean, he kind of knew because I was getting skinnier by the day, but we went up there and rehearsed. And, again, the thing about it is I lived right across the street from a high school, so we immediately knew we had something because the kids waiting for the bus and stuff like that, they hung around because they heard this music coming out of the window. So we knew, we really knew from the beginning. My idea was to get the same people as strong as I could find at every instrument, including singing. And that's what happened. So we had a deal in 6 months, seriously.
It was that short. So wow.
It's that short.
Yeah. Tell us about getting the deal, because obviously back then that's all it was, the biggest thing was obviously playing, but you had to get a deal in order to, to get to the next round.
Well, we had some help.
You had some help from a couple of guys, right? I know one of them very famous, and the other guy was more, I guess, a money man. Can you tell us?
Yeah, well, he was a businessman. He was a textile man, and he spotted us at the Hamptons, and he called his friend Sid Bernstein. And Sid was a fellow that brought the Beatles to the United States. He also brought Bobby Fischer, Boris Spassky to the United States. Consciousness. He also brought, from what people don't know, he brought karate and taekwondo. He was the first one to bring that to Madison Square Garden. He was kind of like a visionary. You know what I mean? He could see this is going to happen. This is going to happen. He was a real character. He was like, kind of the rock and roll version of Mike Todd, the Mike Todd who did all the movies and stuff. A lost breed. He's a guy who would take a chance on a thought. And, there's various things. The other gentleman was the businessman, and they were a great team in the beginning.
Yeah. So what was he like? What was Sid like personally? You remember is there a story, something that...
Oh, there's more than one. There's so
might
many.
not be in the book that you could give a little...
First of all...
Because you said he's a character.
So New York, as we all know, we love food. We love to eat. You know what I'm saying? But when you take it to what dishes at what restaurant, that was Sid. And he was saying like, "Oh, okay, but you don't want to have dessert there. Come on, we're going uptown." He knew exactly. Okay. He was an eater. I think it was his downfall because man, he loved to eat, and he had like these kind of traits that. I guess they're kind of gone now. I mean, I don't know if you all remember the Newport Jazz Festival. There was a jazz festival, and in the 60s, they had a riot up there. And so they were going to cancel it. A gentleman by the name of George Wein was
the big jazz guy, right? The impresario, right? Exactly. Okay.
So he decided not, just to give you a little insight into Sid. Oh boy. So they want to cancel it. So he says, well, no, I'm going to raise the money, which he did not have at that time. And we're going to make this happen. We can't let the Newport Jazz Festival go. Well, he lost his shirt. Because, nobody was going to come because there was a riot. But he did it because, the tradition must go on. So that was the kind of fellow that Sid was. He was a very interesting man. They don't make them like that anymore. They're I mean, he had a tremendous personality of like love and joy. I mean, he ended up having, I think, 6 kids, or he got married he married a beautiful red skeleton dancer, and before you knew it, they had 6 children. I think it was 6. They may have been even more, I'll tell you. But he was just he may not have been the best businessman in the world, but he was a good man. You know what I'm saying? He was a good kind of giving, loving dad and a good guy.
Right. And you said he was a visionary as well. So
that's the way I see him as. In other words, I can see that, for example, I was talking about martial arts. That's going to catch on. So he was the first one to bring it to Madison Square Garden. He would see things that could become, public trends.
Interesting. So he got you the deal. You get the deal. Your first album was covers, right?
Right.
Mostly covers, oral covers, I should say. The next round, and one of the things I want to talk about is the process of you guys writing your own material, right? Because this is where we really can get into the meat and potatoes. You guys always wanted to self-produce in some sort of way, obviously working with some other guys, but you had the chance to be produced or work with Mr. Spector, correct? Phil Spector, right. And you didn't really want to be, quote unquote, Spectorized. Can you tell us about that?
Well, basically, I used the word we, but I wanted to produce the band. I didn't want anybody taking over what we started. Had an idea for a sound, and this was my whole rap. You like what you hear, right? Well, let me do it. Because I had a concept, based upon the organ and the voices and, of course, the musicians. You like it? Give me a shot. And, later years, there's a perfect example of the book. Everybody took credit. Oh, yeah, I wanted. No, you didn't. I wanted. They kicked me under the table when I said no to Phil Spector. I was a huge Phil Spector fan. I admired him but I didn't want to sound like Phil Spector. I wanted to sound like what we're sounding like.
Yeah, so you're saying, like, for instance, the Rascals, you were going to hear the Wall of Spector sound, and that's not you. That was not you.
Oh, there's no doubt about it.
Right. And you would have, by the way, of course, sounded like that.
Wherever we went, we were going to be influenced by whoever they put in the room. So, I threw a fit. And Atlantic was the only one that allowed us to do that.
Okay, sounds good. So I picked out 3 songs. Number 1, Groovin.
Okay.
And the question I have for you really is the girl who you wrote it inspired, still in touch? Is she?
Oh, no.
Is she still?
No,
alive?
she married one of my best friends, and then she passed, unfortunately. But yeah, but she was the one. She was the Moose.
Freudian.
She was a doll. She was a very, very lovely Italian girl. Her name was Adrian. And, I read about, how you get inspired. Well, I was certainly inspired. I was just gaga. I was just so in love. It was ridiculous. And Groovin has a good story. I kind of use this on stage. I'm probably going to write a book. I had somebody else ask me about songs and how
you got to do that. That's what I'm asking you right now.
A lot of people like that. Well, Groovin, has evolved into kind of like a story that I tell on stage. But there's so many factors that went into Groovin. For example, we go back to the Raleigh. Up in the Catskills, they always had a Latin group come in. Always. They loved Latin groups, La Playa Sextet, Tito Puente, they all. So I heard that stuff. And I also felt that stuff, because, I would talk to some of the musicians, and it's a different way of playing from, what we know in America. It's a different, your syncopation is, Santana certainly, embodied that, And so that was and plus coming from New York, we got a huge Latin community. And so, basically it was a very simple thing for me to try to play, and write something like that. And then there's a story behind the, which has evolved over the years, but I say this on stage now, so I might as well say it here, I started off by saying, musicians work Friday and Saturday nights. And as a rule, I've never met a woman who really thought that was a good idea, So, if you want to maintain a relationship, you got to do something, and the best thing you could do is to kind of tell them you love them in a song. So that's the story that has evolved. And that's really what it was about, because the only time that you do have as a musician is Sunday afternoon, because either it's school or work that occupies you Monday through Friday, in our case, Monday through Saturday, So Sunday afternoon, grooving.
Talk about the changes. You remember coming up with the change? You remember coming up with the hook?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. Because that's how I wrote. I wrote all the songs on a piano prior to putting the lyrics to them. You know what I'm saying? And then I got the title, and then the theme evolved, and then basically, and this is where I run into difficulty. I wanted to emulate the Lennon and McCartney. I thought a team would be, the way to go, and I asked Eddie to try and be a lyricist, and he turned out to be a pretty good one,
Right. So he actually benefited from that. So he gave you some of the lyrical content.
Yeah, he was more flowery. I was a little bit more serious with my words, So, I liked his kind of interpretation of the theme.
Yeah, simplistic as well. Pretty.
Yeah, it's just like I say, some people can get a little bit too much in your brain. You know what I'm saying? You got to let other things go. But it was a collaboration because, and this is where I run into difficulty, because it was a collaboration that really never blossomed the way I thought it was going to blossom.
Right. Yeah. Although on paper it seems that way, but
it's okay. I don't care. It's just that, like I say, some people like to do what they do, and some people may not like what they do. And it was never work for me, that's for sure.
One last musical question on Groove, and then we'll get to the next one.
Yeah.
Chuck Rainey, unbelievable bass player, right? Great session player. Everybody knows. Right. The line that he kind of played. Was that Chuck Rainey? or that was.
Well, now which line you're talking about? The first line is like the. That's just a really common Latin line. It's just, it's just everybody. What he did was.
Yes, that.
That's Chuck Rainey.
That's Chuck Rainey. That's what we want to know. Okay.
Yeah, he came in the
that
room.
Was Chuck Rainey, right? Okay.
He came in the room, and Arif said, I think it's time you put a bass player on because the organ bass is just not cutting it in the new world, because sound was getting better and better. Stereo,
definitely not.
And so he brought this giant in, and all you got to do is just play with him once, and you go like, oh my God. Wow. And, it was one of my big regrets. And I got to say this in person, because when we got into the Hall of Fame, I really wanted him to be there, man. I really wanted, because he deserved to be there, man. He really contributed tremendously. And I ran into difficulty with my band. It really hurt me, because come on, man. Are you kidding me? I mean, you got a guy like that. I mean, you know his name, and I hope other people know his name, because usually you don't know the players who are, on people's records,
Yeah.
But he stood out.
It's interesting. Yeah, 100%. That's why I brought him up. And
absolutely.
You know what's sad in a way, and you kind of go back to the whole thing with the ego back in the day, whatever.
Yeah.
You're on a team. You're on a team. It's a lot of ingredients that need to go into this musical journey. And this was so many years later. What the hell? Why not? Why not put your arms around each other and we made this music? We made this together.
That's the tragedy. I mean, like I say, that's the failure of many marriages and business partners and stuff like that. It's just a way of life. It's human nature, evidently, because it happens to all the damn groups, everybody. Just about. The difference is this, and I might as well put my surus up on the table here. You know what I'm saying?
Are you Jewish?
I am now. The English groups, they don't get along. You know what? They get along when they go to the bank, though. Yeah, you got it. See, that's the difference. You see, because most of the English groups that came up, they were not coming from middle-class families. They were coming from, lower income. And so when they make that pound, or euro or whatever, they appreciate it. That's why, they're Stones are on Forbes Fortune 400, 500. I mean, come on. That's smart.
No doubt about it. So let's go to another song. I'm sure you've been asked many times. Good Lovin'. You never thought the track was really up to really up to.
Well, no.
Is that true? That's what I heard. I'm just asking.
Well, the thing is, most people, when they go into a studio, especially, I remember we were in charge. We were in control. We didn't have to take orders from these two geniuses that they happened to put in the room with us, Tom Dowd and Arif Mardin. We were very fortunate to have champions like that. When you do a song over and over, you really know in your heart, when you can do it better or not. Now, a lot of times when you're producing an artist, the artist will always think they can do it better. See, and that's the job of a producer, is to stop it at a certain point, And so basically, I really thought I could sing it better. I thought I could do it better. And Tom, he said, he put his arms around the console and he says, you're going to have to go through me to touch this. And he was right. Now, whether I could do it better or not, we'll never know, right?
Right. I probably doesn't matter. It really doesn't. I don't think.
But I'll tell you something. I used to go to Aretha's sessions, and she was, believe me, she was in complete control.
Oh, yeah?
And when she said, I'm going to do it better, she did it better, man, every single time. Right. She came back and he went like, "Oh man, I thought that was good before, but wow."
Yeah, well, incredible. Now, Arif.
Oh yeah.
One of your best, not only buddies, but just as a person, human being, musically. What was he really like? Talk about it a little bit.
Okay, we're going to use another Yiddish word, huh? Mensch. This is how people should learn how to become not only producers, but I think he came from a family. I think he probably had ambassadors in his family. I know Erdogan did. He just was a gentleman from his head to his foot. He never got angry. He always handled a bunch of young maniacs with respect. Even if you had the stupidest idea of all, he made you feel okay. He was a musical monster, genius, but he was like George Martin was to the Beatles, in other words, you could hit him with any kind of musical genre idea, and he could respond in turn as an arranger. He could do any type of music, and a lot of musics that I never learned, like the Middle Eastern beats and all that. I never knew those until I met him. But a total gentleman. Loved music, and you could tell when somebody loves what they do because there's a joy in the studio, and I cried like a baby when he passed because he was phenomenal.
Last song, and it's interesting that we're actually in 2022 talking about this song. People Gotta Be Free.
Yeah.
Tell us that, and I know there's a little bit of a story behind it.
Well, there's a story always, but that particular one had a meaning because, as you say, it's 2022. It's still, a relevant theme. Look what's going on in this freaking world we're in now. People got to be free. And I was working for Robert Kennedy's campaign in those days, and I was seeing a young lady who was present at that horrible assassination. He just won the primary. They were celebrating the victory. Gone, And I don't think she's ever been the same since then. That was a long time ago. But I happened to listen to it on a shortwave radio. In those days, we didn't have the internet, so it just completely shattered my, because, when people work for a campaign then and now, they're pretty avid about, their candidate, and they're pretty avid about, supporting. And then when all of a sudden somebody cuts the legs right out at a moment of, because it's a pretty big deal when he won that Los Angeles primary, that California primary. And so I just felt the need to say something about what I thought was our loss, And I tried to do it in a way that didn't sound like I was preaching to anybody. I was just, it's the golden rule. Do unto others like you'd like them to do. There's nothing really earth-shattering about it. It's just a very simple statement: is people got to be free. Ask me my opinion. My opinion will be it's a natural situation for a man to be free. The record company thought it was a step, but you have to remember in those days, let's spend the night together was a big deal. Now, they would laugh at you because, what you hear on of course, we always have beep, beep, beep. You can always bleep it out, But so anyway, that became, I'm very proud of the fact that it became number one in Hong Kong, South Africa, Berlin, Germany. Every place that was oppressed felt that.
If you had to answer the question, what's the pivotal moment in your career, life? What would be your answer? Where was that fork in the road?
So many, yeah. So, as your years go by, you'll see, your kids, your marriage, the guru, meeting the guru, so many things contribute to that statement, the good thing is, basically, if you're blessed to have a career, that's a big deal because, one of the things that, you realize is that, especially in as we were talking earlier about the arts, if you can sustain a career, you're doing okay. Especially in music, which is so volatile. There's new acts every day. But I think, in any career that you choose, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're a podcaster, if you could be there for your whole life, you got to really look at that like a blessing. You really have to say okay, I appreciate what I've got because, I really don't have any complaints. Was it perfect? No. You mentioned about the disappointments. Perfect would have been if we could have continued, and the once upon a dream became the always a dream. You know what I'm saying? But we didn't. It didn't happen. But other things happened, and I think that's also, part of the lessons of life. You got to learn how to get kicked a little bit, your kids, they have to learn, it's not always Ozzie and Harriet, you know what I mean? It's not always like, the Brady Bunch, like there's, as we say the word service, there's a lot of, what Italians call it agita. There's a lot of aggravation that comes into life, but it's the way it is. If you don't know that, but you got to count the positives, because let me tell you, as Americans, we got a lot of positives. You just look around the world right now and you say, thank you, because, oh boy, what they're going through over there. You know what I'm saying? Knock on wood, we've never had to experience that. Our parents, our grandparents, but not us.
That's correct. Amen. So, just fast forward a little bit because you did a little bit of producing, and I have a little bit of, I brought out one of the records that you produced for this young lady.
Yeah.
Laura Nyro.
Right.
Quick footnote. I wanted to ask you about her a little bit, but quick little side note. Her old man, Lou Nyro, was my piano tuner.
Of course. That's exactly.
Came to my house. I was a little guy. He's talking to my dad. Yeah, Laura, she's doing this, she's doing that. I'm 5 years old, 6 years old, so I didn't know shit. But what was it like? I'm a big Nyro fan. So what was it like working with her for some of the people that are listening?
She loved to eat. And so we would do this fantastic music, and then all of a sudden she was a Bronx kid, she was tough, Okay, we're going to take a break now. Now you got all musicians in the studio, you know what I'm saying? They're getting like God knows how much for every 2 hours, 3 hours. It's time to eat. She named her company Tuna Fish Music. So absolutely. Exactly. And she would break, and then she'd bring in all this Chinese food, and there goes the session. You know what I mean? Like that was it. I mean, you can't work after you just stuffed yourself to the gills. That's Laura. Laura was just magical lady. And I said this before, and I'll say it again: the purest artist I have ever met in my life. She was the best. She just wanted music. She just wanted to make music. She heard it a certain way. And although she was produced by various people over the years, for the most part, she fought those people because they wanted to have hit records. She would do these phenomenal songs. Other people would come along, like Fifth Dimension, Three Dog Night, you name them, and take out the little nuances that shouldn't have been there for the radio. Radio, what's radio? She could care less. You know what I mean? That's her vision. This is how I hear it. That's how I want to record it. However, Arif and I did that together with the utmost respect on both sides. So it was a joyous, joyous occasion. She loved him, and I loved her.
Right. That's a great story. Pure.
Absolutely.
Artist. And I love, it's funny too. I love the story, about the food because, the great thing about it is we're talking, we're up here. And then she's like, it's time to eat, guys.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, like I say, it was a big deal. I mean, she would tell, like her road guy, his name was Roscoe, kind of aside, while we were doing something in the studio, get the menu. And I'm not talking about a sandwich. You know what I mean? A sandwich takes 5 minutes. She spread it out, man. You know what I mean? And that was it. The day was done.
So at the end of a lot of my interviews, what I like to do is kind of ask some quick hitter questions. For instance, for you, best pizza slice.
Oh, wow.
In New York. Don't tell me Nashville has good pizza because I'm not going to buy that.
We have one. We got one.
Exactly. Where's your best slice?
Oh, God. It's been a long time since I was in New York. I'll tell you the truth. I have a favorite restaurant that basically...
Okay, give me the restaurant. Same thing.
It's called Latanzi's, Latanzi or ZZI. The gentleman who owns it shares the same birthday, the same year as I, November 29th. And he was born in Rome, and I was born in America. And I got to tell you that since the first time I went there, the food is magnificent. It's on Restaurant Row. It's on 46th Street. If anybody wants to go and mention my name, you will be treated like gold, because it's just a fantastic family. The family had 5 restaurants just in New York alone. They had 2 kosher restaurants, as a matter of fact, which is another interesting story. And it's just anything that they make there, pizza or otherwise, is the best.
Beautiful, beautiful. Guilty pleasure for Felix. Something maybe nobody really knows, I don't know. I'm not even going to bring it up.
Well, I'm not guilty about it, but I mean, I like to read. I got an amazing library. I'm an avid reader. And I read magazines, I read books. I just like knowledge. I like to fill up the conscious and the subconscious. I like science fiction. Love science fiction. It all started with Dune, which became a movie. But in the old days when you went to California, science fiction was huge. And that's where I got hooked on that in California, reading Dune and, like all these phenomenal books. And I still do. I still follow for anybody who might be interested, there's a magazine called Locus, Locus, which has all the latest, books, and it rates them. And, you see what's happening if you're interested.
All right, sounds good. Both of us need this sponsor. We got the restaurant, we got the magazine.
There you go.
You know what? By the way, God bless on the science action. I tip off to Mr. and Mrs. Cavaliere, your parents. I mean, your folks gave you that somewhere in there. You got that science head. I know it.
Yeah, well, and the medical world, like, we pay attention to herbs, we pay attention to health, and that's an important thing too, because, the yoga pays attention to health, mental, physical, and spiritual. And that's what it's all about. If you keep yourself healthy, you could play when you're approaching 80. And that's what's happening.
Absolutely. Speaking of playing, Felix Cavaliere's supergroup. We have you on organ.
All right.
Fit the pieces.
Well, let's see. We got a choice. We got some phenomenal guitarists out there. Jimmy from my generation, Jimi Hendrix.
Okay.
Of course, Prince. I wouldn't mind with Prince. And then how about if we back it up with Michael? Good old Michael Jackson. I don't think I've ever seen anybody better than those two, Prince, Michael, Jimmy. That's a pretty good band right there. Okay, I need a bass player. Do I really? I don't know. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
No, you can. Yeah. Let's go to the bass player.
Marcus Miller. Put Marcus Miller in there.
Miller,
Chuck
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. How about on drums?
Well, on drums, I got to say, Dino in his prime would have been the guy. He would. There's a lot of people out there that fit that bill right now. I've been working with Carmine, a PC lately, and he's one that's, I don't know. A lot of times, you just want a drummer to just kind of play the pocket, and that's kind of becoming a lost art. It's not really there because as you say, they have to shine. Well, you don't want to shine too much when I'm in the band.
Absolutely. How about a tenor player, a tenor sax player? Anybody?
Well, King Curtis, if he was here, man, it was the best.
Ooh,
King
nice.
Curtis.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
King. I don't know if anybody knows King Curtis, but that's something you should look up, because if you're going back to the Coasters and the Drifters, and you heard that sax, that was King Curtis. He would come in the room, do one take.
That's a smoking band. That
was his band, Chuck Rainey and Cornell Dupree and Richard T. And I mean, they were good, man. Really
Stuff,
good.
Right, the guys from Stuff. Right.
Really
okay.
good.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, man. You're okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So
you got it.
Any advice for up and coming musicians, people these days, kids these days? The business has changed so much.
Oh yeah. First of all, learn that business. This is not just music. This is music business. If you don't have some sort of business acumen, you're going to have a tough time. Or you have to find somebody that can do it for you. And I've got a manager now that, God sent me. His name is Abby Steinman. And here's our running joke. If I was only born when you had the Rascals. See, but he wasn't born. What can I tell you? Because he's got that mind that knows how to deal with. It's all different now, like you said. What I would say as advice, seriously, is don't have any illusions about this business because it's very, very difficult, especially for the females. That's why females are doing so well, because as a rule, they have to work harder, just to be known and seen. And they do. And they've taken over. There's a lot of really, really famous women now because of that. They work hard. It's hard work, but you also don't have to be on the stage to make a lot of money or to make a living. For example, video games. I mean, no one knows their names, but these people are multimillionaires that do the backgrounds for, you have to have your name in lights. Oh, well, good luck, But there's a lot of places in music, like, for example, when you go down to, Florida, or we just did a cruise. There's a lot of musicians that play these places down there that you never know their name, but they're playing music every week. They're making a decent, if not good, living. As long as the tourists come, you're fine. Don't always look for the stage. That's my advice.
Interesting. Sounds good. So upcoming for you, you're going out with Mickey Dolenz.
Yeah.
Right? How excited are you about that? And tell us what's coming up for Felix. I know you got. I know you're out there starting to get back in the game as well.
Thank goodness, yes. Well, it's been tough, like with this pandemic here. But here's what keeps me going. If you look way backwards to the 1916, was a Spanish flu, which was really not Spanish, but they called it that. I think it started, believe it or not, in Kansas or something like that. True story. Look it up. Right after that was the Roaring Twenties. And that's what I think is going to happen here. If we could just get past this nonsense over there that's disgusting, I think people are really ready to rock. Well, monkey music and our music was all joyful, uplifting for the most part. I think people need that now, and I guess the powers that be that put these things together, in our case, our agencies, they thought this would be a good pairing. Well, we'll see. We'll see if people want to smile.
I think they do. I think
so.
Do you know Mickey? What do you know Mickey personally?
I know all those guys, man. I mean, we crossed paths many times, and I've said it before. I mean, Davy Jones was he could have been a stand-up comedian. Like
really?
he oh God, first of all, he was a little guy. He actually could be a jockey. He used to have horses and run. Second of all, he could do every accent. So he could do all the Irish and the English and the Scottish and all that stuff, and he was hysterical. He was just really he was an actor, those guys were actors and singers. And Mickey's funny as heck. Peter Tork, we lived in Connecticut. He was he was a more serious kind of, but he was a folk musician. He was a musician. And Nesmith, look him up if you haven't. Yeah. If you don't know his accomplishments, you're missing out. I mean, pre-MTV videos, that's pretty good, man.
Yeah, no, he was the real deal, Nesmith, for sure.
He was the real deal.
He really was. Well,
so yeah, we did know one another for a long time,
That's great. So I'm looking forward to the upcoming shows. And I want to say to you, thank you so much for taking the time. I hope you had a good time.
Always.
Memoir of a Rascal. Please check out the book. We're going to put the description down below for you, the link to get it. But you got a few tidbits here. But I believe that Felix has so many more. And I got to tell you, we talked about it before, the book about the songs.
Yeah, I got a gentleman who approached me that wants me to do that, And, there's two different aspects to that. One is like, I when you meet a lot of people, during your lifetime in music, they like to hear stories about those people as well. So we may combine songs and people. But I don't know. I tell you, I have a lot of respect for people who write books. Let me tell you, it's a journey.
Oh, it's brutal.
It's not. It's brutal. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? I think we all have a lot of respect for, what you have done as well. I mean,
Well, thank you, man. I
music,
appreciate that.
expression, the good stuff, I can't say enough. And it was an honor.